I'm Leah Stiles. I am a retired Navy senior chief, and I spent 20 years in the Navy. I also served as a Navy spouse. My husband and I retired from the Navy on the very same day, and we passed the torch to our son, who is now an IT-1 serving active duty Navy. Stationed in Greece. I'm really excited because he has orders back to the States for next year. Really excited about having him back to the States. But yes, we are a Navy family. We are a service family. And today I want to talk about nonprofit entrepreneurship. We hear that term a lot about turning pain into purpose, but I don't feel that we always give the tools and tell how to actually accomplish that, turning your pain into purpose. So I'm going to give you a little background about my story, what I did to turn my pain into purpose, and then some tools for your toolbox, because I think that's what we really need is more tools in our toolbox. So we know that not every business starts with a big idea. Sometimes it starts with a need and it starts with survival. For me, I grew up in upstate New York, in the Albany County foster care system. I spent a lot of time bouncing between foster cares and group homes and residential treatment facilities. And so when the Navy recruiter told me that the Navy is like a family, I said, sign me up, put me in coach. I want that. I want to be that. And he wasn't wrong. Boy, did I get a family out of that. So, but it wasn't easy, right? It never is, and it never goes as planned. And I, went through my service, um, hiding a secret that I had an eating disorder. And I went the first 10 years of my career was suffering in silence. Nobody knew. I didn't want to expose my secret to anybody. And then my world started really crumbling right after the halfway mark of my career. I had just put on E7 in the Navy. That's a chief. And more responsibility is required. And I really pushed myself to be the best service member that I could, the best leader that I could. And while I was absolutely excelling on the outside. On the inside, I was crumbling. Mental health was taking a toll on me via an eating disorder. And I then ended up having medical complications from my eating disorder. I ruptured my esophagus from purging so much, and my chain of command found out. And the commanding officer told me that there's no place in his Navy for me. He really saw it as a discipline issue instead of a mental health issue. And I knew then that there was a lack of knowledge. And then when I went searching for support and help and resources, I realized there was a lack in that as well. So after he found out and he tried to process me out of the Navy, I had to go seek legal support and fight to stay in. And I did. I got to fight. I got to stay in. And but then I also learned a really dangerous secret. And that was that I had to hide my eating disorder even more. And I did that. And I kept pushing as hard as I could for a few more years. And then you'll see in these pictures here, 2018 was definitely one of the hardest years of my life. That 2017, 2018, I went to 8 suicide memorials for people that I love and know and care about. Some of them are in this picture here. My niece who had lived with me at the time, my biological mother, as you can see in the picture on the left, and in the middle, in the center there was my mentor and my neighbor, and he was a command master chief, and he actually wrote the Navy's suicide prevention policy. And so I was just hit one time after another with these losses, and it really made me unravel. Yet it was still time for deployment, and the show must go on. And so I went on the deployment, but I was really sick. I was really sick with my eating disorder, and my luckily that chain of command was very intuitive, very understanding, and the command master chief was a former medic and also had a loved one with an eating disorder, and he knew, he could see how hard I was struggling. And despite me fighting tooth and nail, they held an intervention and medevaced me back to the United States for care. um, when I got back to the States, to the world's largest Navy base, even though they knew that I was coming, there was not one single eating disorder informed provider at the hospital or in the chain of command. And there are limitations on TRICARE paying for inpatient and residential treatment. Um, and that made it very difficult for me to find a place that could help. By the time we finally did, I had almost died multiple times. Trigger warning on these photos, they can be disturbing, but I include them to be able to show um, the juxtaposition that on the outside, I was a senior chief, um, leading, very, very productive, lots of accolades, Sailor of the Year 3 years in a row before I made chief. And I was struggling with an eating disorder and nearly died multiple times. And there just wasn't an infrastructure in place. There wasn't a way, any standard operating procedures or subject matter experts, any of those things that we see for any of the other issues. And it came to the point, when I was in the hospital with, where you see with these photos, that my treatment team called my family in for a full family meeting. And it was there that they told me that they think that we should focus on palliative care, that my eating disorder had gone on for 30 years and wasn't getting much better, after weeks and weeks and months and years in the hospital, and that we should focus on just how to make me comfortable until the end. And I had a decision to make there. I that was a hard one. That was rock bottom for me. And I made a decision. I decided that this isn't how it ends. That my story doesn't end here. I didn't go through all of that growing up. I didn't serve, in the world's finest Navy. I didn't excel through the ranks and build a family, personal family and a Navy family for my story to end there. And I knew that there was a problem. I just wasn't sure. So it came to the point where, tip one, you have to name your storm. What is it? What is it that we were dealing with? Personally, I was dealing with coming back from an eating disorder. And it's kind of the same in entrepreneurship, right? We have to know what we're dealing with to know how to approach it. So right after that, immediately after that meeting with my treatment team, the next class, if you will, was art therapy. And like any disgruntled senior chief, I was older than most of the people that were in the treatment facility. There was another command master chief actually in the treatment facility with me. I don't recall if he was as disgruntled as I at art class, but the assignment was to create a placemat to be used on the table during meal times with a vision board. And I I was pissed off. I thought, why would you want me to make a vision board when you just told me that you don't see a future for me? How am I supposed to see a future for me? But out of spite, I decided to make a very sarcastic, far-fetched vision board. I put things on there that seemed impossible. I put enjoying coffee again. Part of my eating disorder robbed me of that. That felt impossible, right? I put fancy European vacations. I put my NFL football team to win the Super Bowl, and we had never won a Super Bowl up until then. Um, I don't want to hear anything about these football fans. I was not a bandwagon fan. I was a Kansas City Chiefs fan decades before this. But yes, that was the year that we won our first Super Bowl. And spoiler alert, we won it two more times. And further spoiler alert, every single thing on that vision board came true. Up to and including, I put that I wanted to build a house where I could watch the Disney fireworks from my backyard. And I'm so proud to tell you that that is what I do most nights after putting a hard day's work into entrepreneurship. So, tip two, chart your course. Okay. So, when I retired, I really struggled, I think, as most of us do. First of all, I thought that my eating disorder would be better or go away in retirement. Instead, it it really got compounded because on top of everything else, I was losing my identity. Nobody called me senior chief anymore. I'm a mom. I'm a mom of many, actually, my own five children, plus many bonus children that call me mom. And when I retired, it was during COVID, and all of the kids were big and grown, except for my last one, my baby, who then turned 18, was an adult, pretty much a roommate at that point, really independent. So I was struggling with my identity and who I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. And I knew that there was a gap in care. I knew that the system was broken. I knew that we needed a place like Sea Waves. I didn't know what it was. I had always kind of wished that somebody else would do it. And I didn't know how to attack it, how to attack the issue, or to fill those gaps. Um, so once again, I spoke to my mentor, the same command master chief actually that had medevaced me off the aircraft carrier. And I said, I need to do something to make a difference. And he called me out. He called me out as any good mentor would. And he said, Leah, you're never going to really be able to make that difference or to reach the level of healing that you want to reach as long as you're still secretive, like secretive about your eating disorder. You see, even when I was in the hospital nearly dying, I allowed people to believe that I was still on deployment, or I would make excuses, or I would just not mention anything. And he was right. We do know that eating disorders thrive in the dark. And so again, in another moment of spite and combined with maybe a glass of wine or two, I did what any good millennial will do, and I took to social media. And I shared my story on social media. I ripped the Band-Aid off and I told everybody I had an eating disorder, and and wow, that kind of changed everything. It really created a movement. And people started reaching out to me left and right, and identifying and saying, I recognize that in myself, or my shipmate, or my sister, or my brother, or my mother, or a loved one. And all of those comments really led to a similar place. It led to, okay, I finally admitted that, but now what? And so, reflecting on my journey and how hard it was for me as a senior chief, and reflecting as somebody that has lost way too many people to suicide, knowing that the number one cause of death for somebody with an eating disorder is suicide. I knew that I had to come up with something for that now what answer. And so I came up with Sea Waves. And Sea Waves was built to be able to answer all the gaps, all of the questions that I had witnessed through my own experience. Um, and so I think that that's another part, and we'll get to that in the toolbox of turning your pain into purpose, is really being able to identify what was needed. What could I have used along the way? And so as I did more research, and I found that one third of females and one fifth of males in our military community are also struggling with an eating disorder, and that even military spouses and children are three times more likely to have an eating disorder than our civilian counterparts. And so C Waves is actually an acronym. I get asked this a lot. Is it because of, you're nautical or in the Navy? And the answer is yes, I'm nautical and in the Navy. But it stands for exactly what we do. So if you look at the letters, the S, that's the support, that's resources and referrals, that's connecting our military community, everything from active duty to veterans, family members, caretakers, before 9/11, after 9/11, no matter your discharge, we connect you to the eating disorder comprehensive care that exists on the civilian side. And we help you navigate any hurdles and barriers along the way, such as navigating TRICARE. The education, we know that education equals prevention and saving lives. And we created a medal training, which is military eating disorder awareness and literacy. On the business side, what's great is this is an exclusive product. It gives us a competitive advantage, and we'll get to that a little bit later. The A for awareness, we do campaigns and advocacy, letting people know how this is impacting our military community and our readiness. The W is wellness. This is where we bring in the community. We collaborate with other, usually veteran service organizations in the wellness space for events and retreats and groups. We know that connection and community and camaraderie are safeguards against losing our loved ones to the dark place. The A is for advocacy. In 2023, we got the SERVE Act placed into law. This is going to make it so that that age cap for TRICARE that's currently at 21 will be moved to 55, as well as it will mandate the eating disorder education for military leadership, much like we had created. Although that was passed into law in 2023, it's not yet been implemented by the Department of Defense. So we are always working on how to express the need for that, including the data that we get through the V here for validation. We've brought together leading scientists, researchers, and doctors throughout the world that have made it their life's work to research eating disorders in the military. And we're finally being able to bring that data forward to move these policies. The E is obviously for eating disorders and you know addressing the problem that is, and of course trying to provide a little bit more prevention on the front end and then resources for support on the later end. And the S is for suicide prevention. One thing we know, no matter what branch we've served in or what year we served in, no matter how much we make fun of each other, service members, veterans, we know the one thing we are absolutely aligned on is that we are done with losing 22 a day. We are done with that. And so, Sea Waves got it involved in the Face the Fight Coalition, which is an amazing, amazing coalition hosted by USAA that brought together over 250 organizations to really combat that suicide problem that we have in our community. Yet, as I was looking through, of those 250 organizations, none of them were in the eating disorder space. And we know that eating disorders have the second highest mortality rate of all mental illnesses. So even higher than PTS or PTSD that we hear so much about so often. So at Sea Waves, we really fight to make sure that eating disorders are in the suicide prevention space, that people know about them. And as part of our education programs, we even launched a new webinar series called Eating Disorder Prevention is Suicide Prevention, to be able to empower anybody, veteran facing or, military facing in our community, to be able to know and understand that. So that's my story, and now I want to get over to some different tools that you can use if you're looking to turn your pain into purpose, specifically through entrepreneurship and possibly through a nonprofit organization. And we'll talk about maybe even how to choose. That was a big struggle for me. understanding whether I should be a nonprofit or an LLC. And so we'll go through that. Let's put some 7 tools of entrepreneurship insights into your toolbox. And please feel free to put any questions in the chat, comments in the chat after we go through the toolbox. I want to be able to answer any questions. And if you have any tools to add as we go through these, put them in the chat. I do believe the chat will be available later as people get to review this. And I just believe that you can't have too many tools to choose from. So let's make this as interactive as we can and continue to add to that toolbox together. So this is an overview of what we're going to cover. Be niche, validate the gap. Your network is your net worth. I'm sure you've heard that several times over the past couple days. And if you are going to be meeting with some of us next week at the Military Influencers Conference, you will certainly see and hear that again. Use your free veteran resources. Leverage nonprofit perks. We're going to talk a little bit briefly about structure and compliance and then mentorship. So, number 1, own your niche. Okay. So we know that there's more than 45,000 veteran service organizations. And C-Waves is actually the only one in the eating disorder space. So I knew that that was needed. And, we see, a lot of us see, the problem, and we have to ask ourselves, what is the problem that I'm solving? And so many of us decide to start our own business or to start our own nonprofit right after we transition out of the military or shortly after. And so the problem that's most recently on our mind is usually how difficult transition is, right? And so then what happens? We have seen an influx of organizations and nonprofits providing transition support and assistance. And there's so many of them. There's so many of them, and they get lost. They get lost in the sauce. It's hard to tell which ones are fraudulent if you're just doing a Google search. It's hard to tell which ones are old and that are closed down now. It's hard to tell which services offer which organizations offer which services. And even with C-Waves, I mean, I even considered adding a transition support element, and I had asked myself, like, what value would that add for me to step outside my niche? So um some people believe that C-Waves was like too niche because it was just very specific eating disorders. And upon first glance, you would wonder if that's even needed until you dig in into the data and information and lived experience. So I would ask you, own your niche. We don't need another veteran transition organization, right? Um, and so be specific about the problem that you're solving, and don't reinvent the wheel. Own your piece of the puzzle, because here's the thing: if you do something and you do it really really well and it is niche, then you're much better off partnering with another organization, bringing your skill, your program, your product to another organization that already exists. Then again, you're not recreating the wheel, having to build your own structure, having to build from the ground up. In fact, I would recommend that even if it is your intention to have your own business and program, start off by partnering with somebody that's a few years ahead of you, a little bit more senior, learn their best practices, identify their gaps, and do your part and helping build their organization with your special skill. And we'll get to that in a little bit too. But don't create a whole nother organization that's going to overlap or repeat. And that leads to the next one of, validate the gap. Make sure that there's not an organization that already overlaps with exactly what you're trying to do. Um, so especially veterans, right? Collaborate with another organization, or bring, if they're doing things that are really really well done, but in one geographical area, talk to them about replicating that as an ambassador in your area, or don't don't hesitate to reach out and talk about what you can offer. I can tell you, as the founder and CEO of an organization, I love when somebody wants to come along, they get to experience a little bit of OJT and learn the ways of the land and get some experience under their belt. And then if they want to take that and branch off on their own after that, that's amazing too. But also start small. Okay. Um, Sometimes when we look at the big picture of all the things that we want to do, we can get stuck in analysis paralysis and then none of it gets started. So take a piece of it, start small, think pilot project before national launch. Take pieces of it. And like I said, a great way to test your pieces is with an already existing organization. Also, I'll put this here that um, always be prepared to pivot. Okay. Pivoting is not a failure, it's a strategy. And, I even look at when C-Waves was first stood up, the last S stood for self care. And self care is important. It was very important. But we recently rebranded for the last S to stand for suicide prevention. Self care easily fell under the W in wellness. And so much of what we were doing and our mission was more aligned with suicide prevention. So we pivoted that through our name. Sure, it took a little bit of rebranding and updating paperwork, but it definitely aligned with our mission better. We didn't lose the self-care piece. We just moved it under another brand. But we were just pivoting with that, and constantly revisiting what the need is and how we can meet the need. All right. Network is your net worth. And we hear this a lot, um, but I mean it. Practical steps. These days, there, I would say it is darn near impossible to start a business or a program or a nonprofit if you do not have an updated LinkedIn profile. That's your first one-stop shop right there. Um, it doesn't cost anything for the regular membership. Veterans get 1 year free for the premium. Even without the premium, update that. Your title under your name is seen on every single comment that you make. Your what do you say? How you say banner at the top of your page? That's free real estate to explain exactly who you are, what you're doing, and what you want to do. Number one step: if you haven't left here with a tool today, make sure that your LinkedIn is updated. Then reach out on LinkedIn. And I don't mean just, go through and what we call, spray and pray, connecting with absolutely everybody. Build relationships when you connect. When you send a connection, introduce yourself. Mention, what led you to want to connect with them. Um, get involved with your local veteran entrepreneur groups. I live in Florida. Oh, there's some really good ones here in Florida. And they were a huge piece of how I first came with this basic idea. And I came to my peers and I was like, this is what I'm trying to solve. Is this an LLC? Is this a nonprofit? Like, what is this? So get involved. If not in person, if you're not quite there yet, to want to go out and do some of those meet and greets, then get involved with the virtual groups. This is a perfect example of the way to connect. We love what Ryan and Henry, we love that they've made this available for us to be able to connect virtually. And there's other groups that we'll talk about here shortly. But get involved in them. Introduce yourself, send connections, follow up on connections. And that leads me to use your free veteran resources. And that combines with your network and your net worth. We know that our local SCORE provides, and SBA, they provide business resources as a whole, not necessarily just for veterans, but those are free business resources specifically for veterans. We look at, I went through VEI, the Veteran Entrepreneur Institute, and I will certainly say that one of the best programs that has certainly helped me through all of this was the is the Syracuse IVMF programs. I went through VWise, I went through EBV. I'm putting in my application to be an ambassador. Reach out to any of the IVMF ambassadors. That's another great place. If you don't know who to connect with on LinkedIn, start looking for your IVMF ambassadors. Great place to start. And when I think about the programs that IVMF offers through VWise and EBV and all look at their robust programs they provide, and most of them at no cost to the military. If military veterans, if there is a cost, it's very small. Purchase your flight and then the whole week is covered with your lodging and your food and your programming. So any costs that do, very small incidental costs that come along. So don't confuse free with no value. Those programs are free, but they are packed full of value. And then you want to leverage your nonprofit perks. For example, Google Ad Grants provides $10,000 a month for Google Ads for nonprofits. Use that. Use that. That's free ad credit. Canva Pro is free for nonprofits. Google Workspace, free for nonprofits. TechSoup provides a lot of support free to nonprofits. So dig in there. Once again, free does not equal no value. And then I put structure and compliance here because a lot of people, especially in the conversation around pain to purpose, are wondering, um, they're wondering, how do I decide? And one of the ways that I present that is, within LLC, you are your own boss. That is your business. That is your program. You make every decision. You make every um, you wear every single hat. um, One of the major differences between an LLC and a nonprofit is a board of directors. A nonprofit must have a board of directors. And there's lots of compliance that you have to file at the state and federal level, especially if you want your 501c3 tax exempt for that. Um, Other than that, a nonprofit organization is a business. We still have to generate revenue and marketing and people management and product management and program management and all of those things. The question you would want to ask yourself is, do I want to do this alone? Is this my baby? I want all of the decisions. Or am I wanting to bring on a board of directors? Pros and cons for bringing on a board of directors. Number one, pro is you get a variety of knowledge and education and support. Con is that there's a voting structure. And keeping that in mind, that your board of directors could essentially vote you off of your own the nonprofit that you founded, and that has been done before. So you do want to go into that knowing that their votes and opinions and ideas for strategy and direction may or may not align with what you originally set your organization up for. So when making the decision between LLC and nonprofit, that's definitely something to look at is what kind of leadership structure and compliance are you wanting to work with. And the last tool for your toolbox is mentorship. I believe we should always have a mentor and be a mentor. That's non-negotiable. Especially in the entrepreneur space, especially in the veteran space. In fact, I have more than one mentor. Have a finance mentor, have a operations mentor, have a non-business related mentor, somebody that you respect, that has a healthy marriage. Have a marriage mentor, a relationship mentor, or you know build your mentorship bucket. And uh and then and then be a mentor, right? If you leave these different events, if you leave Vet Social or MIC or any of these other groups without having gained a mentor, or gained becoming a mentor for somebody else, then you've really missed a huge opportunity. And so that's another immediate tool for you to apply right now, right now, is establish both being and being a mentor and getting mentors. And so that leaves me to the final overall tip of the presentation, which is shine your signal. I believe that we all have strengths and weaknesses. I surround myself with people whose strengths complement my weaknesses. And I look at this in a way, especially with you being a mentor. Um, go back with me to the good days. I'm going to age myself with the Care Bears and the Care Bear stare. And I love how each of them have a different little design and emoji on their stomach. And ask yourself, like, what would your emoji be? What would your sign be? What is your special signal? And it can change, right? And it can change. But this helps you define what you have to offer as a mentor, or even just offer out giving light into the world. Right now, for me, on my tummy, I would have a microphone. Right now, I am using my voice. I'm using my voice to shine a light in the dark for eating disorders in the military, to shine a light in the dark for those that I know that are still in the dark, right? They're looking for that light, to provide advocacy in all things mental health and entrepreneurship. So mine right now is the megaphone, changes from time to time, and that aligns with my goals. I'm looking for more speaking engagements. I'm doing more podcasts, and really using that light to shine, right? And, as I said, you know, it takes all of us. And that's one of our strengths as veterans, is the way that we collaborate and come together. And when, in Care Bears, there was a big, dark, scary problem to solve that one Care Bear couldn't solve alone. What did they do? They came together and they all shined their little light, their little way together to be stronger and shine that light. So I want you to ask yourself, um, what direction would you point them towards? Like, what is your light, and how do you get them to the right direction? And then we'll close on this, on be the lighthouse. Be that lighthouse, like we said, for whatever it is that you are turning your pain into purpose for. Be the lighthouse for others. At Sea Waves, our motto, our saying is need a light, be a light. And we say that with two different punctuations. We say it here with a semicolon, and then we say it here with a question mark. And what's the difference? With the semicolon, I look back to what we talked about earlier, on my worst day, of being offered palliative care. And that semicolon, that means your story doesn't end here. I was absolutely in the dark. I decided my story doesn't end here. And then to move forward, I I I became the light. I decided be a light, and shining that light for others, and on eating disorders in the military. So need a light. Your story doesn't end here. Be a light. The other way that we say it is with a question mark. So need a light, question mark, as in be the person that you needed during that time. If you needed an intrusive leader, be an intrusive leader. If you needed a loyal brother or sister, be that. Be a loyal brother or sister. If you needed a mother, I took that one a little bit overboard. I needed a mother, and I became the mother to many. Maybe we don't go that far, but be that person that you needed, because we are finding that inherently, sometimes it's hard to shine the light for yourself. It is hard. And when we look at turning pain into purpose, if we start by shining the light for others, inherently, if you stop for a moment, you'll look and see that you have then lit your own path as well. I heard a saying once that said, I helped a friend climb a mountain and realize I was at the top too." And sometimes that's just easier, especially in our veteran community, where, we can help somebody else along, but then you'll see that you lit your own path as well. And then it's just making sure that once you have, that you bring somebody else along, that you pass the torch, literally, that you make sure that you bring somebody else there. So need a light, be a light. Please feel free to reach out. We have all kinds of ways to get connected here. There's QR codes and link trees, and follow us on our socials and subscribe to our newsletter. And I'm always willing to mentor pitch competitions. Yesterday's pitch competition was amazing. It was great to see that. If you saw that and you want to get involved in another one and you need somebody to practice with or help develop your pitch with, if you have questions about nonprofit organizations, or if you're struggling with an eating disorder or any other mental health issues and you need a connection to resources, please, by all means, get in touch. I would be really, really happy to hear from you. I'm going to check and see if we have any comments or questions here. Let's see. All right, nothing specific here as far as questions or comments, but again, thank you to Ryan and Henry and the team for putting on Vet Social. We're so appreciative for you to give us a place to come together um, and to support and to share our resources with each other. Take care. Need a light, be a light.